Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. I am Hasham Ali Khan. Last video I have explained you about the process of registration. So in examination frequently question will be asked regarding the process of registration or cancellation of registration. So in this video I am going to explain you about the cancellation of registration, then revocation of cancellation, suspension of registration, and the meaning of the term supply of goods and services. So this video is also very important from examination point of view. So before starting the explanation of this cancellation of registration, take a screenshot of the points which I have written, then I'll explain all the points in detail. Now, first of all, I'm going to explain you about the cancellation of registrations. Once a person is registered, later on the registration may be cancelled. So what are the circumstances under which the registration will be cancelled? Now I am going to explain. The first point, the registration of a person can be cancelled in the following cases. A number of situations are there where the registration under GST will be cancelled. So how it will be cancelled? It may be cancelled by the application of the registered person, or suo motu, the proper officer of GST can suo motu cancel the registration. So we will discuss all the points when the registration will be cancelled. First one, the business has been discontinued or transferred fully for any reason. If a person has discontinued the business, or if a person has transferred the business, transferred fully, including death of the proprietor, suppose the proprietor dies, or amalgamated and other legal entities with other legal entities, demerged or otherwise disposed of. A business is disposed of, or the proprietor dies, or if a company has amalgamated with any other entity, or there is demerger. Demerger means separation. So in all these circumstances, what are the circumstances? First of all, the business may be discontinued, or the business may be transferred fully, or the business may be stopped due to the death of the proprietor, or the business has been amalgamated with any other business, or the business has been demerged. Like this, in these cases, the registration will be cancelled. Secondly, there is a change in the constitution of the business. If the constitution of the business has been changed, then the registration will be cancelled. Third one, the taxable person is no longer liable to be registered under the GST law. The GST law has given some criteria when the person will be registered. If that criteria is failed, for example, 20 lakh or 10 lakh rupees is the aggregate turnover. Already we have discussed in the previous video. That's the criteria. Suppose if the criteria failed, if the aggregate turnover falls below that threshold limit, then the registration will be cancelled. Then the proper officer, he is called PO, can suo motu on his own cancel registration in the following cases. I told you, registration can be cancelled either by the application of the registered person or suo motu by the proper officer. So when the proper officer suo motu will cancel the registration, what circumstances? First one, the registered person does not conduct any business from the declared place of business. At the time of registration, the place of business should be declared. If later on the registered person is not conducting the business at the registered place, then the PO has the authority to cancel the registration if he is not conducting the business from the registered place. Second, the registered person issues bills or invoice without supply of goods and services in violation of the provisions of the Act. The provisions of GST says the invoices, bills should be issued whenever there is a supply of goods and services. If the registered person is not issuing the invoices and bills at the time of supply supply of goods and services, the PO will cancel the registration. Third, the registered person has not furnished returns for a continuous period of 6 months. Continuously for a period of 6 months, the registered person is not filing the returns under GST. Then the PO has the authority to cancel the registration continuously for 6 months if the registered person has not submitted. Then a person paying tax under composition scheme. What is this composition scheme? I will tell you. A person paying tax under composition scheme has not furnished returns for the 3 consecutive tax period. For 3 consecutive tax period, the person has not submitted the return. Who is that person? A person who has registered under composition scheme. What is this composition scheme? I am explaining. Composition scheme aids at simplifying compliance for small taxpayers. Because this GST a little bit lengthy procedure is there, so it will be a burden for the taxpayer, for a small taxpayer. The GST has given one scheme called composition scheme for small taxpayers. What is that scheme? Under this scheme, a business with a turnover of less than 1.5 crore or rupees 75 lakh in specified states pays a specified percentage as tax without charging any tax from the recipient of such goods or services. If a person whose aggregate turnover is below 1.5 crore or below 75 lakh in specified states. Some specified states the threshold is 75 lakh. For other states it is 1.5 crore. So if the aggregate turnover is below this threshold limit, then the person can apply for composition scheme. When he is registered under composition scheme, he has to pay small percentage of GST, small percentage, without charging any tax, any GST from the recipient of goods and services. Suppose if I have registered under a composition scheme, I will pay a small percentage of tax to GST. I will not charge any GST from the goods supplied, from the recipient of the goods. In other words, input tax credit cannot be claimed because I am not charging the tax on the customers. That means I am not entitled for input tax credit. This is the condition. Next, any person who has taken voluntary registration has not commenced business within 6 months from the date of registration. Sometimes a person will take voluntary registration. Actually, registration is not required for that person, but voluntarily he got himself as registered. If the person has registered, he has to commence the business within 6 months from the date of registration. If he has not commenced the business within 6 months and 6 months expired, then the registration will be cancelled. Next one is registration has been obtained by means of fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of the facts. By wrongdoing, if the registration has been done, that means by a fraud, by misrepresentation, by misconduct. Like this, if something illegally he has done in order to get the registration, then the registration will be cancelled by the PO, proper officer. So these are the circumstances in which the registration will be cancelled. The registration on the GST will be cancelled. Next one is revocation of cancellation. Once cancellation is over, then the person, the registered person whose registration is cancelled, can apply to the proper officer for revocation of that cancellation order. So when he can apply for revocation, revocation means taken back. The meaning of revocation is taken back. The order of cancellation will be taken back. That means it is not cancelled, but it will be continued as a registered. When registration has been cancelled by the proper officer on his own, then the registered person whose registration has been cancelled can submit an application for revocation of cancellation. If the registration is cancelled by the PO, proper officer, then the person has the right to apply for revocation of his cancellation. So there is a form, online form. He has to submit the form for revocation of his cancellation. The form GST portal he has to go in the prescribed form GST REC 21. GST REC 21 is the form for revocation of cancellation. Such an application must be submitted within a period of 30 days. This application for revocation should be submitted within 30 days from the order of cancellation given by PO. Within 30 days. And if the PO is satisfied there are sufficient grounds for revocation, he or she shall pass an order revoking the cancellation. If the proper officer see that there is a ground that it should not be revoked, then it will revoke the cancellation. Then it will continue as a registered person. So these are the provisions regarding revocation of cancellation. Now suspension of cancellation. Suspension for time period. Then when a person applies for cancellation or when the PO initiates the process of cancellation, then such registration is said to be in suspension till the completion of cancellation proceedings. So if a person has applied for cancellation of his registration or suo motu, the proper officer has given the cancellation, then till that cancellation proceedings are not completed. The cancellation proceedings are not completed till that time the cancellation is said to be under suspension. Suspension period is there. For example, the person has applied for cancellation, but cancellation order has not yet passed. Still it is there. So when he applies for cancellation, it is called suspension. So during the period of suspension of registration, what is the consequence? The consequence, a taxable person whose registration is a suspension cannot make any taxable supply during the period of suspension. So during the period of suspension, the registered person, the person who has applied for cancellation, should not supply the goods and services. And such person cannot collect tax from the customers and he cannot issue tax invoice during the suspension. So during the suspension period, the person cannot collect the GST from the customers, cannot issue the invoices under GST during the suspension period. That's all. So these are the provisions regarding suspension of registration. Suspension of registration. Now supply of goods and services. The last topic in this video is regarding supply of goods and services. Now very important topic. In GST, the incidence of tax is the point when tax is leviable is called supply. That means when the GST is applied, the incidence of GST is at the time of supply. So what is the meaning of supply? Everybody must know the meaning of the term supply, because supply is the point at which GST is levied and is decided by the time, place and value of supply. The GST will depend on the time, on the place, on the value of supply. So supply is very, very important for calculating the GST, for levying the GST. Now, hence it is very important to understand the concept of supply, because GST depends on supply. So the concept of supply should be very clear. Then only we can correctly tax the GST. A taxable supply means a supply of goods or services that are chargeable to GST. Whenever we come across the word taxable supply, it means the goods and services which are taxable under GST, which are chargeable to tax under GST. That is called taxable supply. Now, supply includes all forms of supply of goods and services by a taxable person, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person. So what do you mean by supply? It includes all the different forms of supplies like sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license. All these things will come within the ambit of supply, and where consideration should be there. There should be consideration for the supply. If there is no consideration, then it is not called supply. So in this video, I have explained you the provisions regarding cancellation of registration, revocation of that cancellation, and suspension of registration, and lastly supply of goods and services. Inshallah, we'll continue the next topic in the next video.